The media isn't lying to you. I know that sounds insane, but here's the thing: they don't need to lie. They've discovered something far more effective. Something that shapes your entire perception of reality without ever telling a single falsehood. What you don't see controls you more than what you do. Think about it. Every news story you watch this week, who chose those stories? Out of millions of events happening globally, someone decided you needed to see these 20 things, not those 1,000 others. Selection is the weapon. The lie of omission is the most powerful lie of all, because you can't question what you never knew existed. You can't be outraged about atrocities you were never shown. You can't vote against policies you were never told about. Today, we're going to expose the machinery behind modern information control, not conspiracy, not tinfoil hat territory, just cold, documented, provable methodology. By the end of this video, you'll never watch the news the same way again. The selection game. Every single day, roughly 10,000 noteworthy events happen around the world. Wars, scientific breakthroughs, corporate crimes, political scandals, government decisions that will affect your life. Your evening news covers about 20 of them, 20 out of 10,000. That's a 0.2% selection rate. Who makes that selection? Not you, not democracy. A handful of editors in a handful of newsrooms, often owned by the same 6 corporations. Now here's the critical part. They don't have to lie about any of those 20 stories. Every fact can be accurate. Every quote can be real. Every statistic can be verified. The smart way to keep people passive is to limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, while allowing debate within that spectrum. You get passionate debates about the topics they chose for you. You never even hear about the topics they didn't choose. This isn't censorship in the traditional sense. It's something more elegant, more invisible, and infinitely more effective. But the selection is only the beginning of how your reality gets shaped. The framing trap. Same event, same facts, completely different stories. Let me show you how this works. 1,000 people march in the streets. One outlet says massive protest erupts against government policy. Another says small group gathers to voice concerns. Both technically accurate, neither lying. But which reality do you live in? It depends on which one you watched. Framing isn't bias, it's architecture. Here's a real example that happened. A study found that when covering economic news, outlets used words like surge and boom for the same job numbers they later called modest gains, depending on which party held office. The numbers didn't change. The frame did. If this is making you rethink how you consume information, hit like and subscribe to keep exposing what they hide, because what comes next is even more disturbing. You see, framing operates on your subconscious. You don't know you're being influenced. You just feel that certain things are true, certain people are threats, certain solutions are obvious. Frame controls meaning. And when everyone uses the same frame, alternative perspectives become literally unthinkable. But framing is just one tool in a much larger arsenal. Omission mastery. What they don't tell you defines your reality more than what they do. In 2019, the largest protest in human history happened in India. Estimates range from 150 to 250 million people, 250 million humans taking to the streets. How much coverage did it get in Western media? Almost none. Why? Because it didn't fit the narrative priorities of that news cycle. Because it wasn't useful for anyone's agenda. Because covering it might raise uncomfortable questions about economic policies being promoted elsewhere. Invisible. Now think about what that means. 250 million people protested, and most of the Western world had no idea it happened. If something that massive can be effectively erased from public consciousness, what else are you missing? This isn't about one event. It's about a systematic pattern. Stories that challenge powerful interests get buried. Stories that serve powerful interests get amplified. The press is so powerful that it can make the criminal look like the victim and make the victim look like the criminal. The media didn't lie about the India protests. They just chose to look the other way. And your reality was shaped by that choice. Speaking of choices, let's talk about who's making them. The owner class. 6 corporations control over 90% of American media. 6. That's Disney, Comcast, News Corp, Viacom, CBS, AT&T, and a handful of digital giants. These companies have boards. Those boards have members. Those members sit on other boards, banks, weapons manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies, oil corporations. Now ask yourself a simple question. If you owned a news network and your board members also sat on the board of a defense contractor, would you cover stories that threatened weapons sales? If your parent company had billions invested in a foreign country, would you air critical coverage of that country's government? Money talks, news listens. This isn't conspiracy. It's corporate governance. It's fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. It's the same reason no tobacco company ever funded research about lung cancer. You don't need a secret meeting in a dark room. You don't need orders from above. You just need everyone to understand which stories advance their interests and which stories threaten them. The system self-censors through economic incentive. And that brings us to how they keep you focused on the wrong things entirely. Distraction engine. While you were arguing about the latest celebrity scandal, 3 bills that will affect your financial future for decades were passed with bipartisan support and 0 primetime coverage. While you were debating which politician said something offensive on social media, a major merger consolidated even more media power into fewer hands. This is the distraction engine, and it runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They keep you fighting each other so you won't fight them. It's not that entertainment news is fake. It's real. It's accurate. It's also strategically prioritized above the stories that would actually inform your civic participation. Follow the pattern. Every time major economic legislation is being debated, suddenly there's a culture war story that dominates the news cycle. Every time a major trade deal is being negotiated, there's a scandal that captures all attention. Coincidence after coincidence after coincidence. The Roman emperors understood this. They called it bread and circuses. Keep the population fed and entertained, and they won't notice how power is being consolidated. We've upgraded the circus to smartphones, but the principle is exactly the same. Now let's examine how they manufacture the appearance of disagreement. Fake debate system. Here's how manufactured consent really works. You're given 2 options. They argue passionately. You pick a side. You feel like you participated in democracy. But here's what you missed: who decided those were the only 2 options. When the Iraq War was being debated, media coverage presented hawks versus moderate hawks. Where were the voices saying this was entirely based on fabricated intelligence? They existed. They were right. They weren't on your television. The debate is not left vs right. It's the state vs you. This happens constantly. Healthcare debates happen between current system and slightly modified system. Where's the analysis of what 20 other developed nations do differently? Trade policy debates happen between this deal and that deal. Where's the fundamental questioning of who these deals really serve? Narrow options, controlled results. By defining the boundaries of acceptable debate, they ensure that no matter which side wins, certain interests never lose. You feel like you had a choice. You feel like democracy worked. But the menu was prepared before you arrived, and some dishes were never available to order. This connects directly to something even more disturbing: expert illusion. They bring on experts, credentialed, distinguished, authoritative. What they don't tell you is who pays those experts. A think tank funded by weapons manufacturers provides the military analyst. A foundation backed by pharmaceutical companies provides the health policy expert. A research institute funded by Wall Street provides the economic commentator. Sponsored. None of this is disclosed. You just see the credentials. Harvard, Stanford, former government official, impressive, trustworthy. But follow the funding and suddenly the expert's conclusions start making a different kind of sense. This isn't new. In the 1950s, doctors appeared in cigarette advertisements. They were real doctors. They really recommended those brands. They were also being paid by tobacco companies. Today's version is more sophisticated. The payment isn't direct to the person on screen. It flows through institutions, through grants, through revolving door job opportunities. The expert speaks, and you never see the hand behind them. The expert is telling the truth as they see it, but their vision has been carefully cultivated by those who fund their research. And this machinery relies on one crucial psychological vulnerability: repetition weapon. If you repeat something enough times, it becomes true. Not factually true, but true in the minds of the population. This is called the illusory truth effect, and it's been documented extensively by cognitive scientists. Your brain literally cannot distinguish between familiarity and accuracy. A lie told once remains a lie. A lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth. Now apply this to modern media. The same talking points appear across every network. The same phrases are repeated by every pundit. The same conclusions are reached by every outlet. After a week of saturation coverage, the narrative feels obviously true. How could it be otherwise? Everyone is saying it. But remember, those outlets are owned by the same handful of corporations. They share content. They use the same wire services. They book the same guests. Repetition equals reality. The echo chamber isn't accidental. It's architectural. When every source tells you the same story, you don't have a free press. You have a distributed propaganda system with multiple brands. And the truly insidious part, they're not even lying. Every individual statement can be true. But the repetition pattern shapes what feels true. And that brings us to the final evolution of this system, the algorithm era. Everything we've discussed just got multiplied by 1,000. Social media algorithms don't just show you what you want to see. They show you what generates the most engagement. And what generates engagement? Outrage, fear, tribal conflict. Your feed is engineered for addiction, not information. The algorithm doesn't care about truth. It cares about clicks. It cares about time on platform. It cares about advertising revenue. So it learns what triggers you emotionally and feeds you more of that. The result: you live in a custom-built reality that confirms everything you already believe while making you increasingly hostile to anyone who believes differently. And here's the terrifying part. The algorithm is now being used by governments and corporations to test which narratives spread fastest. They can A/B test propaganda in real time. They can identify which emotional triggers work best on which demographics. They can manufacture viral movements that feel organic. Your outrage is their data, and your data is their power. The traditional media manufactured consent through selection and framing. Social media manufactures consent through personalized psychological manipulation at scale. But there is a way out of this trap: breaking free. Now that you see the machinery, you can start to resist it. Here's how. First, ask the question they don't want you to ask: what am I not being shown? For every major story, search for what's being ignored. What happened in the rest of the world that day? What legislation passed while you were distracted? 1. Follow the money behind every source. 2. Seek out international perspectives. 3. Question emotional triggers. 4. Find what they're not covering. Second, follow the money. Every time an expert speaks, ask who funds them. Every time a narrative dominates, ask who benefits from it. Every time a story is amplified, ask why this story and not the 1,000 others. Third, diversify radically. Read sources from different countries, different political perspectives, different economic interests. Not because any of them are unbiased, none are, but because comparing their biases reveals what each one is hiding. Informed citizens cannot be controlled. The system relies on you being passive, on you accepting the menu you're given, on you believing that the boundaries of debate are the boundaries of possibility. Refuse that passivity. Question everything. The media isn't lying to you. It's doing something worse. It's shaping the very reality in which lies and truth become indistinguishable. Let me leave you with this. Every piece of information you consume has been selected, framed, and presented by someone with interests that may not align with yours. The most powerful propaganda is invisible because it defines what is possible to think. They don't need to lie to you when they can simply decide what questions you're allowed to ask. They don't need to censor you when they can drown important stories in a flood of irrelevant noise. They don't need to imprison dissidents when they can make dissent seem crazy by never showing it mainstream support. The conscious manipulation of the habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. But here's the thing about machinery: once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you understand how the selection works, how the framing operates, how the omissions shape your reality, you become immune to its passive influence. You start asking better questions. You start seeking what's hidden. You start thinking for yourself. That's the most dangerous thing a citizen can do. And that's exactly what they're afraid of. If you made it this far, comment manufactured reality if you'll never watch the news the same way again. Every government lies. Every corporation lies. The question is, what are they lying about? And now you know how to find out. The truth is out there. You just have to look past what they are showing you. Subscribe if you want to keep seeing what they hide. Until next time, question everything.